Good morning, dear students. For Sorry for the delayed entry. Since there was a technical knack in the while connecting the class to me again, there was a delay. Coming to today's class, sorry, I haven't seen most of my students. This is the second consecutive year we are dealing with online classes with our dear students from all over Karnataka. Like I haven't met you all physically. To be honest, this is the second consecutive year. We were forced to engage classes through online mode. Whatever so again, the decision of the university is we have to abide by it. Coming to today's class, I have got a few important texts to deal with. In the very first class, I'll be dealing with one important text called The Wasteland. The Wasteland by Thomas Stern Eliot, T.S. Eliot. The Wasteland was published in the year 1922. Look at the title, The Wasteland. The Wasteland ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಬಂಜರು ಭೂಮಿ ಅಂತ ಲೈಕ್ ಜಗತ್ತು ಒಂಥರ ಬಂಜರು ಭೂಮಿ ತರ ಕಾಣುತ್ತೆ ಯಾರಿಗೆ ಟಿ ಎಸ್ ಎಲಿಯಟ್ಗೆ ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ರೀಸನ್ ವಾಟ್ ಮೈಟ್ ಬಿ ದ ಕಾಸ್ ಫಾರ್ ಎಲಿಯಟ್ ಟು ಸಿ ದಿಸ್ ವರ್ಲ್ಡ್ as a wasteland and to consider the modern people, the people of the modern world, as the inhabitants of this wasteland. The world itself appears like wasteland for T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot. Look at the background. 1918. 1914 to 1918. 1914ರಿಂದ 18 ತನಕ there was a first world war. ಜಾಗತಿಕ ಯುದ್ಧ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. And impact of the first world war was not that didn't have that shattering effect or disturbing impact on the world, but still again it caused so many consequences. Like it had an effect on few important geographical again aspects of the world, geopolitical issues. Particularly it had some issues, like it had problem with some geopolitical issues. The first world war had just ended. Had just ended in the year 1918, and T.S. Eliot took up this gigantic task of writing this lengthiest poem. It's the lengthiest modern poem, Wasteland, the Wasteland. Which got published in 1922. He started to write this poem in the year 1919. Okay, 1919. The poem was first published in the two important journals called the Criterion and the Dial. The Criterion and the Dial, famous journals in America, United States of America, and it came into publication as a full form poem. It was published in the year 1922. You see the title, The Wasteland, Banjaru Bhumi anta. And Banjaru Bhumi anta ಕಾಣಿಸುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ. The reason is like Eliot always believed that time has ripened enough to consider literature seriously. So he felt that literature should be used as a weapon to showcase or to display or unleash the horrors or terrors of life. ಜೀವನದ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಮುಖ ಇದೆ. ಜೀವನದಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೀ ನಗು ಸಂತೋಷದ ಕ್ಷಣಗಳಷ್ಟೇ ಅಲ್ಲ. So life has the other side also. What is that other side? The other side of life is disparity, gloominess, okay, and also complete horror. Complete horror means there are terrifying, horrifying images of world. There are other side. If you see what is happening in Ukraine, if you see what happened in Syria, there was one photograph which got the best photo in the year 2018, where the dead body, the corpse of a boy, was lying on the beach The corpse of a four-year-old boy was lying on the beach in Syria. The photographer got the best photography award for that. So what I mean to say is there are uh, other sides of heart. Heart can be used to showcase or to display the other side of human nature. So we have created beautiful world. At the same time, we have destroyed this beautiful world. There are two sides of human life, isn't it? You know, in that way, like Eliot was a modern poet, very much a modern poet. In this poem can be easily called as a mourning song, the mourning song of the death of European civilization. This poem can be easily called as the mourning song of the death of European civilization. In the Westland, Eliot mourns the death of European civilization, and the poem expresses what? The disillusionment of a generation, the post-war generation in Europe, and that it merely presents a vision of dissolution, a vision of desolation and spiritual drought. There is complete drought of spirituality. There is no respect for ethics, values, or moral values, or ethical values, or spiritual values. And man lost interest in religion and God, and started to show disrespect towards God. Eliot is a modern poet who had huge respect for tradition and also for religion. He was a ardent follower of Christianity. Okay, you can read a play called Murder in the Cathedral, where he shows his true and again love towards Christianity. He was an ardent follower of Christianity. The play Murder in the Cathedral just reflects that. At the same time, as I told you, Eliot in this poem speaks about the Oriental aspects in Westland, and the images that T.S. Eliot uses in this poem reflect what the present contemporary life. ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಜಗತ್ತು ಹೇಗಿದೆ ಆ ಇಮೇಜಸ್ನ ಬಳಸ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾನೆ. At the same time, the very speciality of Eliot is he juggles between the past and the present. He juggles between the past and the present. He tries to connect modernity with tradition. He tries to connect with modernity with history. He tries to connect modern man with historical characters. So whatever that we see, that we are undergoing in the present, had been experienced by our ancestors in the past. Man has not learned from history. People say history is of dead people. History is a subject which deals about dead people. History is revisited. And history, there is some issues going on with Taj Mahal. What is there in Taj Mahal under Taj Mahal? History is revisited, and we read history so that man should not repeat history. History is created, not repeated. You should not make the people say history repeats. Yes, history repeats, but why do we read the history of two world wars? So that there should not be a scope for third world war, isn't it? There should not be a scope for third world war. ಮೂರನೇ ಜಾಗತಿಕ ಯುದ್ಧ ಆಗಬಾರ್ದು ಅಂತಾನೆ ಎರಡು ಮಹಾಯುದ್ಧದ ಇತಿಹಾಸವನ್ನು ನಾವು ತಿಳ್ಕೊಳ್ತೀವಿ, isn't it? And Eliot always felt time has ripened enough, matured enough to show the other side of poetry, other side of literature. Literature is a space where you can criticize, where you can brutally attack, or mock at human actions. There were Georgian poets, Edwardian poets during the time of Eliot who wrote poems on cuckoos, butterflies, rabbits, which Eliot felt again is not needed for the present contemporary world. So Eliot considered that literature should be used to discuss serious issues. Serious issues. That is the reason why he wrote a poem called Banjar Bhumi, or uh, the wasteland. The wasteland. There is this poem has been translated into Kannada. The title of the poem is Banjaru Bhumi. Okay, ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ಈ poem ಪದ್ಯ ತರ್ಜುಮೆ ಆಗಿದೆ, ಭಾಷಾಂತರ ಆಗಿದೆ. So what I mean to say here is like wasteland reflects what the horrors of modern world. You know, the poem again here in this poem he uses so many historical characters, so many mythological characters, so many religious characters to convey so many to convey a proper meaning. T.S. Eliot was well versed with Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, and all the other famous European languages. He was a well-read man, and he read Greek literature in Greek language itself. So what I mean to say here is he was well versed in Sanskrit also. He had read Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, and all that. So you can see the impact of his what excessive reading, the impact of excessive reading in this poem called The Wasteland. Though again, at the same time, look at the sociological condition. The World War had just ended, had just concluded, and at the same time there was too much of scope given to urbanization. People started to move from rural part of England, rural part of Europe towards cities because of rapid growth. Cities were expanding, and there were so many industries again were set up, and so many buildings were coming up. A concrete buildings, concrete jungle were rising during those days, and people started to move from rural areas to urban areas, cities, and that is the reason why Eliot consider that there again this should be the theme. This should be the theme for my poetry. And as a poet, he senses the issues. He can sense the issues of his own age. He can sense the issues, the issues of priority, of his own age. As I told you, there was rapid change in every sphere of life. There was rapid change in every sphere of life, and they could delight and so could be popular, but they could not express the complexity, variety, and intricacy of modern life. There were poets who could not express, who could not give space or scope for intricacies, complexities, or varieties of modern life, modern life. Eliot, in his pronouncements, again and again emphasized the need of establishing a new tradition and said we must learn to take literature seriously. He tried to establish the tradition through his own practice. His own poetry is urban. And not countryside, and not countryside like John Keats' poem like Ode to Nightingale, Ode to Autumn, okay, Ode on a Grecian Urn, even Wordsworth's poems, okay, Chinchanabe and other poems, even Resolution and Independence, Leech Gatherer, such poems like the setting of those poems are rural countryside, isn't it? And whereas this poem shifts from countryside to reflect the problems of city life, and his own poetry is urban and not a countryside of insects, birds, or flowers. He didn't write poems on flowers, insects, or butterflies or birds like cuckoo, nightingale. He didn't write poems on that because forget he knew This is not literature is meant for. Again, that is the reason you can see a significant shift in choosing the themes for poetry. At the same time, there was atmosphere of perplexity. Perplexity means confusion and anxiety. Anxiety has been further accentuated by the long strides forward that the study of the psychology has taken since the times of Sigmund Freud. There were so many innovations, discoveries going on during that time. Okay, psychological aspects of human nature were revealed. Okay, and again, Sigmund Freud's theory of Oedipus complex, has caused a sensation. The study of the subconscious and the unconscious. That means again, there were so many research going on in the field of psychology. Even that had an impact on literature. Eliot's Wasteland has been called the epic of the modern age. This poem is called as the epic of modern age, which presents a vivid and transparent panorama of the anarchy prevailing in the so-called contemporary civilization. In the so-called contemporary civilization. I repeat, Eliot's Wasteland has been called the epic of the modern age, which presents a vivid and transparent panorama of the anarchy prevailing in the so-called contemporary civilization or civilized world. And the poem also reflects what? Reflects modernity, science, okay, questioning what? Logical thinking. Okay, the imagery of the vocabulary of the modern poet reflects what? The influence of science and scientific inventions. Realism is the subject matter again that led the modern poet to reject what? Highly ornate and artificial poetic style of romantics. Artificial poetic style of romantics in favor of a language which resembles closely the language of everyday life. The language of everyday life. Modern poetry is characterized by the use of colloquial diction, colloquial or local language, speech rhythms, and prosaic words. This realism in diction and versification and in subject matter is marked feature of the poetry of T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot. The new poetry, as I told you, this revolt is best exemplified in the poetry of T.S. Eliot. The poet again sees life in the naked realism. Not forget about language. Even when it comes to language, using language uses realism in diction, realism in language, in choosing language, and also speech rhythms, and prosaic words. As I told you, the poet sees life in its naked realism. In its naked realism. ಜೀವನವನ್ನ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಕಣ್ಣಿಗೆ ಹೇಗೆ ಕಾಣುತ್ತೆ ಹಾಗೆ ಕಂಡುಕೊಳ್ಳೋದು, ಹಾಗೆ ಚಿತ್ರಿಸೋದು. Okay, seeing life as it is. And even the most prosaic and commonplace or subjects are considered as a suitable topics or discussion. The heavy thud of bus traffic, the creaking sound of cars, the rattling noise of the railway trains, okay, the drone of an aeroplane, all these find their echo in modern poetry. Whereas in romantic poetry, we used to feel what? The chirping noise of birds, the rippling sound produced by the flow of water, rippling sound of water flow, chirping sound of birds. But whereas when it comes to modern poetry, what do we see? What do we see? The creaking sound made of cars, made by cars, and also what? The rattling noise of railway trains, and also what? The heavy thud of bus traffic, the heavy thud of bus traffic. This is what, like, urban urban life replacing what? Urban life replacing country life, isn't it? And the squalor and the dinginess of an industrial, the squalor and the dinginess, the squalor and the dinginess of a dinginess, DINGINESS, dinginess of an industrial civilization are reflected everywhere in the works of poets like T.S. Eliot, in the works of poets like T.S. Eliot. And at the same time, as I told you, the Great War was a nervous shattering experience. Man lost faith in accepted values, and as a consequence, this note of bitterness is even more pronounced after the war. The Westland reflects what? The tragic gloom and despair of the post-war world. This does not mean that 20th century poetry is a poetry of despair. As a matter of fact, the modern poet sees life as a whole, wants to face it squarely and no wish to escape. He wants to face life squarely, and he doesn't have, again, modern poet never wishes to escape from such a life into the world of dreams. He looks at life without spectacle of romance, and paints it as he finds it, in all its ugliness, in all its misery and headache. Nor has he lost his capacity of laughter. Even in the works of most pessimistic of poets, we find wit, satire, humor, grim jests and jokes. Sometimes even serious subjects are treated in the poetry of Eliot in a tone of levity and flippancy. In the tone of levity and flippancy. In the tone of levity and flippancy. So again, even Eliot, as a poet, as a modern poet, he was immensely influenced by metaphysical poets. Metaphysical poets had an impact on Eliot. At the same time, Eliot also uses indirectness, again, indirect style. Again, modern poetry is indirect, dramatic images. Again, it's not for using what? Dramatic images and symbols heightened the poem of the language. Moreover, literary devices like pun, paradox, irony, mock epic, juxtaposition made poetry subtle, complex, and indirect. Symbols and images, along with it, with their diverse meanings and economy, phrases rendered the reader bewildered, confused. Eliot makes an extensive use of symbolism to communicate his visions. Uses extensive Again, he makes an use of extensive symbolism, means uses symbolism extensively to communicate his visions and sensations, often too complicated. Such a use of symbolism results in what? Ambiguity. In addition, freedom of grammar and syntax, and telescoping of words and thoughts add to the confusion of the reader. So, what I mean to say here is, as a reader, when you start reading this poem, you'll be ambiguous or confused because it uses too many symbols, too many images, too many allusions to come to a proper meaning. Uh, but still, the poem is called as a social document. This poem is called as a social document. Why it is called as a social document? Because this poem could reflect what the contemporary life of 20th century, early part of 20th century, the modern world. The poem could reflect what the society as it is, could reflect society as it is. Extreme compactness in poetry. Eliot was attracted towards the French symbolism, and that is the reason why again uses too much of condensation, condensation of form. Okay, condensation of form. All inessential details are eliminated. Comprehensiveness and vastness is gained through extreme condensation and compression. Extreme condensation and compression. A great deal of experience is packed into a little space. A great deal of experience is packed into a little space. That is the reason why this poem can be termed as a modern epic. It can be termed as a modern epic. It's not a poem, it's a modern epic. Critic after critic has described The Wasteland as a very obscure poem, and the chief source of difficulty is the extreme elusiveness of Eliot's style. The Wasteland contains several allusions, literary, religious, mythological, etc., in which some are obvious, others disguised, and other were obscure. Okay. Critics say that on the eve of writing The Wasteland, Eliot was reading two important anthropological books. Two important anthropological books. One is Jesse Weston's The Ritual and to Romance, Ritual to Romance, and another one is James Weston's The Golden Bough. James Weston's The Golden Bough. These two books of anthropology had an impact on Eliot. So that is the reason why Eliot wrote such a book on mankind. The myths connected with Attis, Adonis, and Osiris, these myths are fundamental to an understanding of the poem. They are the objective correlative for the emotions. Okay, for the emotions. What do you mean by objective correlative? A set of objects or situations or chain of events, okay, which can be connected to come to a proper meaning, which can be connected to come to a proper meaning. Again, as I told you, in this poem, Eliot tries to connect past with the present, tradition with the modernity. Okay, at the same time, it tries to connect east and west. It tries to connect east and west. Okay, both east and west. East means Asia, west means Europe, America. Both in the east and west, according to Eliot, lust has been condemned as a source of all evil. In this poem, The Wasteland, again, it speaks about three important wastelands: the medieval wasteland of the Fisher King, and the second wasteland is King Oedipus and his wasteland. King Oedipus and his wasteland. You all know the story of Oedipus. Again, marrying his own mother, okay, without his knowledge. King Oedipus and his wasteland, and the third wasteland he's dealing with is the biblical wasteland. Again, biblical wasteland. Again, and he also uses the mythological character with the name Tiresias. Tiresias is the mythological character, the central figure, a connecting link, a unifying link, a connecting link or the unifying link in the poem. He has got, again, Tiresias is the central figure in the poem because the mythological character Tiresias appears quite frequently in the entire poem. Though it's a lengthy poem, you can see Tiresias again appearing here and there, and Tiresias again. Eliot has used this mythological character called Tiresias quite often in the poem. So, what do you know about Tiresias? Tiresias again is a mythological character who connects all the parts of the poem, a centrifugal force in the poem. At the same time, he is a mythological character again who had undergone both the life of a man and a woman. ಒಂದು ಜೀವಿತಾವಧಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆಣ್ಣಾಗಿ ಕೂಡ ಗಂಡಾಗಿ ಕೂಡ ಎರಡು ರೀತಿಯ ಜೀವನವನ್ನು ನೋಡಿರ್ತಾನೆ ಅವನು. ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಹ್ಯಾಡ್ ಬೀನ್ again he had experienced both the life. Again that is the reason why Shakespeare, again Eliot uses that character as the central character or the central figure, okay, who connects the entire poem. Eliot, again, The Wasteland, this poem again it's been divided into five parts. Again, the first part is the burial of the dead. Before commencing the poem, again Eliot dedicates this poem to Ezra Pound. Ezra Pound, whom he considered as his guru, his master. He got immensely influenced by the Irish poet called Ezra Pound. Ezra Pound is known for writing the shortest poem called In a Station Metro. In a Station Metro is the shortest poem which is written by Ezra Pound. A poem of 2 lines, a poem of just 2 lines, which got published and which was written by Ezra Pound. Now, T.S. Eliot dedicates this poem to Ezra Pound. He calls him as Il Miglia or Fabbro. Il Miglia or Fabbro means better artisan. Better artisan. Il Miglia or Fabbro, Il Miglia or Fabbro, that phrase is borrowed from Dante's Divine Comedy. Dante's Divine Comedy. In the first part, the burial of the dead, what do we see? In the burial of the dead, again, the burial of the dead refers to the death of the fertility god. The death of the fertility god, as we have God for each and every aspects of life in Hindu religion, so does the Greeks. The Greeks do have gods for everything. Greek mythology has got gods for everything. You have Apollo, Zeus, God for everything, for all aspects of life. Indra, ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಯಮ, ಸರಸ್ವತಿ, ಲಕ್ಷ್ಮಿ, ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ದೇವತೆಗಳು ಇರೋ ಹಾಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಪುರಾಣಗಳಲ್ಲೂ ಇರೋ ಹಾಗೆ ಗ್ರೀಕ್ ಪುರಾಣಗಳಲ್ಲಿ, ಗ್ರೀಕ್ mythology do have some gods, like gods for every spheres of life, every aspects of life. In this first part, the burial of the dead, the burial of the dead refers to the death of fertility god. The inhabitants of the contemporary land or the contemporary world, wasteland, are spiritually dead. They dislike to be roused from their death in life situation. ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಬದುಕಿದ್ದೀವಿ, ದೈಹಿಕವಾಗಿ ಬದುಕಿದ್ದೀವಿ, ಬಟ್ ಮಾನಸಿಕವಾಗಿ ಸತ್ತಿದ್ದೀವಿ. Eliot always believed that it is better to do something good. Again, if you can't do something bad, something good or something bad, you cannot lead a life listlessly without doing anything, without being active. Eliot always felt that most of us in this modern world are leading listless or active, means inactive life. We are not active in our day-to-day life. So he feels that modern people are the true inhabitants of this wasteland because they are leading a life which is spiritually dead. They are spiritually dead. They don't have any respect for values. They are spiritually dead, and for them the only thing that they enjoy is pleasures of life, and they dislike to be roused from their death in life situation, like they dislike to be roused. ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಬದುಕಿದ್ದು ಸತ್ತಾಗೆ ಬದುಕಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ನಮ್ಮಂಥವ್ರನ್ನ ಜಾಗೃತಿಗೊಳಿಸೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಪಟ್ಟರು we dislike to be roused from our death life situation. ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಬದುಕಿದ್ದು ಸತ್ತಾಗೆ ಸುಮಾರು ಜನ ಜೀವಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, isn't it? We are here to do something, to achieve something, to give something for mankind. If you can't do good, do something bad ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. If you can't be Gandhi, if you can't be Mahatma, be Hitler, because Hitler could change the course of geopolitics of the Second World War, and that is the impact of Second World War. And people are cautious about war. Due to one Hitler, people are cautious about dictatorship. People are cautious about wars. So what I mean to say here is, Again, you can be Gandhi, or if you want, you can be Hitler, but you have to be active. That is what Eliot always believed in. Like Eliot felt that people are listlessly wasting their time in this modern world without doing anything, without doing. They're spiritually dead, religiously dead, morally dead. The modern civilization is spiritually barren and dead. That is what you see in for part one, the burial of the dead. The burial of the dead. ಸತ್ತಿರೋರ್ನ ನೀವೇನ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು? ಮಣ್ಣು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, ಇಸಂಟ್ ಇಟ್? ಮಣ್ಣು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಆಧುನಿಕ ಜಗತ್ತಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಬದುಕಿರುವ ಆಧುನಿಕ ಮಾನವರು, ವಿ ಆರ್ ಸ್ಪಿರಿಚುವಲಿ ಡೆಡ್. ವಿ ಆರ್ bound to be buried. We should be like, we don't have any right to live. That's like, it is called, again he feels that people are spiritually, morally, ethically, religious wise also, they are dead. And it deals, again, first part deals with the various kinds of love and death. In fact, look at the way it begins the poem. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead, mixing memories and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. It is called as the cruel month because, April is known for what? Spring season. Spring season or autumn season. In Europe, it is called as autumn season. In India, we call it as spring season, isn't it? April is the cruelest month for those who are dead, who are literally dead, mentally dead. Breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, steering dull roots with spring rain. People in the modern world dislike to be roast. We don't want to enjoy even the spring season. It is called as the cruel month because it is compared to the human life, as spring season revokes life into the dead natural objects. It also enables us to remember the old sweet memories and desires. Like this, Eliot tries to shade the life thirst. Again, it becomes cruel. Again, people again are spiritually dead. He tries to shade the modern man. He tries to mock at him. you know for that, he uses so many images. Eliot always believed believed in a theory, like, so again, which tells that sordid present is always related with the meaningful past. Again, the sordid present, the sordid, sombre, dull life that we are leading has got something to do with our meaningful past. So what I mean to say is, Eliot again tries to connect past with the present. He uses so many images, like uses the image, a place name, again a lake near Munich. Munich is in Germany, you all know. Again, uses the name of the lake called Sternberges, and also Hofgarten. Hofgarten is a cafe in Germany. Okay, uses so many images where like the modern places, names of modern present day places, to give a modern touch. And he also uses the images from uh, Bible. Again, some of the references he uses from Bible. Okay, like Mary, hold on tight. Again, that line he uses line number 16. He borrows it from Ovid's Roman poet, Ovid's lines, again, which states all women are basically women, and uses borrows materials even from Dante's Divine Comedy, and also Shakespeare's plays. Tempest, uses the lines from Tempest, and also Cleopatra, Antonio and Cleopatra. Okay, and he also speaks about Hyacinth, a son of King of Sparta. affectionate to Apollo, god, lovable to Sapphire's god of west wind. He died by the iron bangle thrown by Sapphire's, and the blood that dropped from his dead again head was converted into flowers by Apollo, god. By Apollo, god. A boy, Hyacinth is a boy who appears in Greek mythology. He uses the name of Hyacinth. He also uh, borrows some lines from Joseph Conrad's again book again called Youths. Okay, and also from Bible, like he also borrows material from lines from Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, you know, and also as I told you, Dante's Divine Comedy in French, sorry, Divine Comedy, which is written in Italian language, and also Inferno, Dante's Inferno. Okay, let us see what he has to say in part two. Part two is called titled as a game of chess. Game of chess, taken from Thomas Middleton's play titled A Game of Chess. Where he speaks about the chair she sat, the chair she sat in, like a burnished throne, glowed on the marble, where the glass, held up by the standards wrought with the fruited wines. So these lines, again, borrowed from Shakespeare's Antonio and Cleopatra, Act 2, Scene 1, lines like line number 190. 190. He reminds the readers of the situation where Cleopatra heads on ships to meet Antony. To meet Antony. At the same time, what do we see in this part two, game of chess? This part explores what explores the failure of sexual relationship in the modern wasteland. The failure of sexual relationship in the modern wasteland. So, according to Eliot, sex is not considered as a spiritual act. Sex is no more a spiritual act. It was called as considered as a spiritual act in those days. That is the reason why we see the carvings on these temples of Hindu temples again, which resembles like the postures, the sexual postures or angles. So what I mean to say is, sex is an act of production where you are giving space for life. Where it's an act of production where you are giving birth to a life, ಒಂದು ಜೀವಕ್ಕೆ ಜೀವನ ಒಂದು ಹುಟ್ಟು ಕೊಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಾ ನೀವು. So the same sex is considered as an art of, like, it's again as a commercial what commercial or momentary pleasure. Sex is no more considered as a spiritual act. So it is considered just a momentary pleasure in the modern world. Sex has become a matter of intrigue, a matter of moves and counter moves between men and women. It has become a mere source of pleasure, and has lost its spiritual significance, for which he uses the mythological character called King Tero, who ravishes his own wife's sister called Philomel. So what does Philomel do? Was raped by Remo again. Tero physically ravishes his wife's sister. So to take revenge, his wife, Tero's wife, again his wife, what does she do? Kills King's son, kills Tero's son, and serves his heart for dinner. So he serves the heart of King's son for dinner to king himself. So the goddess, in order to protect their sisters, These sisters say they convert, they transform these sisters into birds, into birds. So you have the reference of Philomel, who has got something to do with the life of King Tero. King Tero. So according to Eliot, family life. So what does it indicate? Family life, both in high and low society, has reached a stalemate. Has reached a stalemate, and life has become a round, dull routine. A round, dull routine, and Eliot traces the futility, boredom, neurosis of modern life to the perversion of sexual relationships. You know, Eliot feels that life has become the round, dull routine. Nobody has time for anybody. Even husband has no time for his own wife. Wife will be busy watching serials. Husband will be busy watching, reading newspapers, whereas the kids will be reading, will be playing. So nobody has time for each other's family life has lost its prominence, has lost its ಪ್ರಾಮಿನೆನ್ಸ್. ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ಅವಿಭಕ್ತ ಕುಟುಂಬ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಪದ್ಧತಿ ಇತ್ತು. ಲೈಕ್ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾಡ್ ದಟ್ ಜಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಫ್ಯಾಮಿಲಿ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್. ಇಂಡಿಯಾ ಹ್ಯಾಡ್ ದಟ್ ಜಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಫ್ಯಾಮಿಲಿ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಪಾಸ್ಟ್ ವೇರ್ ವಿ ಯೂಸ್ ಟು ಸಿಟ್ ಟುಗೆದರ್, ಎಂಜಾಯ್ ಲೈಫ್, feel like there were huge again scope for values during those days, isn't it? So Eliot tries to recheck, or rejuvenate those lost values in the modern world. Again, at the same time, uses the lines from Tempest, as I told you, and also from John Webster's The Devil's Law, Devil's the White Devil, okay, and also uh, Middleton Murray's Women Beware Women. Again, he borrows Hurry Up, again, uses these lines quite often in the poem. Hurry up, please, it's time. Hurry up, please, it's time. This particular line is quite often repeated in the poem to signify that modern man is too busy. Is too busy in his life. He has no scope, again, he has no time for his own family members. Even even uses the image of busy London Bridge. Busy London Bridge. People are rushing towards offices. School children are rushing towards schools. Buses are filled with school children. Okay, and also people are going offices. All are busy in their life in cities, metropolitan cities like Bangalore. If you visit Majestic, you can see everyone will be rushing. People will be hurrying. Hurry up, please, it's time. Hurry up, please, it's time. This is the common phrase that we quite commonly hear in cosmopolitan cities like Bangalore or London or Mumbai or any part of the world. You know, that is the reason why he uses those lines, that particular line, quite frequently in this part. So, what do we see in part 3? The Fire Sermon. The Fire Sermon. The title is taken from the famous sermon of Lord Buddha. The title is taken from the famous sermon by Lord Buddha. Till now, Eliot used so many images, allusions, symbols from Greek mythologies, from Italian poets, like from Bible, from other European writers. But now he looks towards east. But now in part 3, he looks towards east. The Fire Sermon. The title is taken from Buddha's famous sermon, taken from some famous sermon. In this in part 3, the Fire Sermon, he reflects the world. The world is shown as the world is shown burning with lust and passion, and hatredness and other thousand evils, So this world is filled with what? Lust, hatredness, okay, and too much of passion, selfishness, okay, self-centered, qualities, and means people are selfish, opportunists, and there is too much of hatredness, tumba dvesha, too much of intolerance, too much of intolerance across the world. So Eliot as a poet can figure it out, can again visualize what is happening in the world. Both East and West condemns lust as what? As a source of evil. As a source of evil. This is what you see in Bible, Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, and even Quran. All the major religions of the world in their scriptures have advocated, propagated what? Propagated that lust is the source of all evils, of all evils. Okay, spirituality is dead. Modern humanity knows only lust and no true love. No true love. There is no scope for true love. So modern humanity knows only what? Sex or lust. The sterile burning of sex or lust is brought out by different sexual experiences in the contemporary world, in the contemporary wasteland. He uses so many images. Even Cleopatra was known for, in the past, Cleopatra was also known for illicit sexual relationship with a common man called Antonio. You know, Whereas you have a typist who is having sexual relationship, illicit sexual relationship with her boss, which is a modern example. So you have to connect it. As a reader, you have to connect it. The sterile burning of sex bar lust is brought out by different sexual experiences in the contemporary wasteland. The spiritual degeneration of the 20th century is very well brought out in this part, in the part called the part called the fire sermon. He also uses the lines from to his choir mistress, the lines again written in the poem to his choir mistress by Andrew Morville, and also lines from uh, famous other again Greek myths. Okay, let me move on to uh, the next part. Uh, that is death by the water. Death by the water. I'll extend my class for another 10 minutes since I lost few important minutes of my class in the initial stage. I'll use another 10 minutes or few minutes, 7 to 8 minutes in this for this class to conclude the poem. Death by water. In this part, he speaks about what? He speaks about the journey of Jesus, journey to Emmaus by Jesus, who was seen on the third day of his crucifixion. Crucifixion, he was seen. He was seen on again in Emmaus by his own followers, and also in this part, what else we see? Again, this part speaks about uh, the Jesus love, suffering, betrayed, again betrayal that he suffered because of the Judas. This part mainly speaks of Jesus love and his suffering, betrayal, imprisonment, hearing, punishment through crucifixion, and graveyard of Jesus, okay, which is still there in Jerusalem or near Jerusalem, right? These images are recalled by T.S. Eliot in this part. So, journey to Emmaus, where the disciples of Jesus, okay, disciples of Jesus, who felt being orphaned and the suffering of losing Jesus, and uh, again, in this again section, he also speaks about another mythological story called story again, which deals about the Gale myth. The Gale myth speaks about Gale myth, a pot, again the Gale pot, which was used by Jesus Christ during his last supper. Uh, last supper, Last Supper, before he was crucified, Jesus took the Last Supper. Jesus have again used a pot like on the bowl like thing. Again, that gale pot again was stolen from the chapel by the king called Perilus, who steals ಒಂದು ಚಾಪಲ್ ಒಂದು ಚರ್ಚಿಂದ ಅದನ್ನ ಕತ್ಕೊಂಡು ತಗೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ತಾನೆ ಪೆರಿಲಸ್, who faces all the obstacles and uh, and if he succeeds he would get the gale pot, and again means he steals it, and later on his kingdom suffers because of sterility, because of a lack of rain by due to stealing the gale pot from, or the tumbler, or the bowl that he steals from the chapel. Again, ಕೃಷ್ಣನ ಡಿನ್ನರ್ ಭೋಜನ ಪಾತ್ರೆ ಅಂತ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಸಪ್ಪರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, and also uses again the lines from Brihad Aranyakas Upanishad, Datta Dvayadam Damyata, okay, Datta Dvayadam Damyata, and also uses the lines from Webster's The White Devil, and also from Dante's Divine Comedy once again. Okay, Dante's Divine Comedy is also used in the last part. Again, as I told you, what the thunder said. Again, till now he speaks about the horror, the boredom, or the spiritual decay of modern man, the sexual degeneration, commercialization, or considering degeneration or commercialization of sex. He spoke about all these issues in all those 4 parts. But what do you see in the last part? In the last part, what the thunder said is it reflects what it speaks about the promise of regeneration. He feels that there is scope for regeneration for modern man. What the thunder said speaks about. Thunder means what? Thunder means scope for rain. Rain means what? Fertility. Rain means fertility. Water, fertility. So what the thunder said in this last part, from pessimism to optimism, there is a shift from pessimism to optimism. So there is scope for regeneration, promise of regeneration. It is possible. So what modern man has to do? So it also, the last part, the poem the wasteland, in the last part, the poem makes promise and prophecy. It goes beyond a mere diagnosis of the spiritual distemperament of the age, the picture of the contemporary wasteland which it presents might be bleak and gloomy, but it does not end on a note of despair. It suggests that regeneration is possible through suffering and penance. Man has sinned, man has committed sin, and he must atone to God for his sins through suffering. In the last section of the poem, the thunder is already heard, and the clouds are there gathered. Clouds are already there. Thus a promise is held out by the poet. The coming of the rain is nothing but divine grace. It's nothing but coming of rain reflects what? The divine grace. ದೇವರ ಆಶೀರ್ವಾದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಮ ಅಂತ. ಮಳೆ ಬೀಳೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಇಲ್ಲಿವರೆಗೂ ಬಂಜರು ಭೂಮಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡಿದಂಥ ಕವಿ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ, in the last section, he speaks about regeneration, from degeneration to regeneration. Regeneration is possible only when man atones to his mistake, and man suffers or man atones to his mistakes and suffers because of the sins that he has committed. So he has to atone to the mercy of God. Eliot in this poem brings together the wisdom of east, west, and shows the spiritual regeneration can be achieved through man's willingness again in surrendering, willingness to surrender to the mercy of God, to the mercy of God. He ends the poem with Brihadar Aranyakas Upanishad, lines from Brihad Aranyakas Upanishad. The world needs what? Datta Dayadvam, Datta Dayadvam, Damyata, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Usually, lessons of peace comes at the end. So that is the reason why he uses the lines from Brihad Aranyakas Upanishad, Datta Dayadvam Damyata Shanti Shanti Shanti. The peace which passeth, again the passeth understanding. Eliot brings in together with the wisdom of east and west and shows the spiritual regeneration comes if only we heed HEED, we heed to the voice of God. The voice of God is heard through thunder, the voice of God is heard through thunder. The mercy of God is felt through the raindrops. Eliot has not glorified the past at the cost of, you make it a note, Eliot has not glorified the past at the cost of or the expense of the present. The sex relationship in the past also has been equally futile and meaningless. In this sense, the present resembles the past. So I thank you one and all for your patient listening. With that, keynotes or important aspects on this poem, I conclude this class. Thank you one and all. I'll meet you once again tomorrow with a different text. I hope I've given justice for this long, lengthier poem called The Wasteland, which took almost 4 years for Eliot to write, and to speak on that poem in an hour, to teach on that on that poem for an hour. It's an impeccable task. It's an impossible task, impossible task. But I hope I have tried to give justice for the allotted hour. Thank you, one and all. I'll come up with a different text tomorrow. All the best for the remaining part of the day. Thank you, one and all.